morning, everyone. This is the FAFSA webinar brought to you by Santander Bank. And today we have joining us Monica Fedor from Santander Community College. She is the financial aid campus supervisor for Santander. We have Dr. Janice Fedor, formerly with Elms College, and now the founder
and content creator, College Conversations with Dr. Fedor.
There we go. And we're very glad to have her. She's a wealth of knowledge and does other things with us. And we have Tony Bubba. He's the Vice President of Community Partnerships with Santander Bank. And he is going to tell you a little bit about how financial aid played a part in his life.
So good morning, everyone, and really excited to be here. As McConnell said, I'm Toby Singh Baba. I'm with Santander Bank's Corporate Social Responsibility team. Many of you may recognize the brand. Perhaps you know Santander as your local bank, your local branch. We do have a pretty good presence in the Northeast. Perhaps maybe your future car loan or your parents' car loan comes from Santander. We are one of the largest auto lenders in the country. But what a lot of people don't necessarily connect and realize is Santander is also heavily committed to the community, and whether it's our commitment through philanthropy, through volunteerism, as part of our public $11 billion Inclusive Communities Plan commitment, we really do a lot to make sure that we are giving back to the communities where we ourselves live and work. And one of the most obvious ways is actually our support of higher education. The Santander brand is actually a brand that you may end up finding or you would see across the world. So whether you go to Europe, Latin or South America, you will see that Santander brand all over the world. And although every country and every region is a little bit different, one of the things that connects all of us across the brand and across the world is higher education. In fact, Santander is the largest supporter of higher education of any company around the entire world. In fact, going back to around 1996, we have invested well more than $1.3 billion towards higher education. And that commitment continues, whether it's philanthropically or here today, where we want to support an event just like this. The truth is you have such a wide array of choices when it comes to what your next steps are when you go onto your educational journey. And whether it's to go on and you know right away that you're going for that doctorate, or whether you say, you know what, I want to go to trade school, or whether you say, I'm going to start off at community college, which is someplace that I did, and go to a transfer program. One of the common themes that you should be looking at is, what is this going to cost me? And what I urge all of you to do is to make sure that as you leave with that degree, number one is to get that degree, but as you leave with that degree or whatever it may be, to really minimize what that financial burden is going to be on you going forward in the future. You're going to have dreams. You're going to want to, own your own house, maybe start your own business, buy that car, maybe through Santander, but through all of that, the larger that student loan burden or the larger that your debt burden will make it harder to do some of those other things that you want to do. And this is why the FAFSA application is so important, because it's really going to be that way that you can maximize and find out what kind of grants, what kind of lower cost financing is out there for me. You're going to hear some really great information in the rest of this session around that. But of course, coming from the banker perspective, coming from my own personal experience, I also want to leave you with an additional tip. And that is, please, please, please minimize any of the other debt that you incur when you go away to school or when you're in college. It might be, next to impossible in some cases to get that degree without incurring some type of debt. But what you can control are things like, if you get that piece of plastic, get that first credit card, being very smart about only spending what you can pay back and not carrying that other type of debt once you get out of school. It's one of those things, if I could turn back the clock personally, that is probably one of the biggest things that I would have done instead of, getting debt for pizza or other things. Really, any debt that you incur should be what some refers to more good debt, such as furthering your education. So try to bucket that up there somewhere in the mind, because what I will tell you is that what I commonly say as a rule of thumb is anything that someone usually puts on a credit card is going to cost them at least double, if not more, when you factor in opportunity cost, if you follow that. but at least double. So when you go to buy something on a card, if it's $20, if it's on sale, know that to the average individual, by the time all is said and done, it's going to cost them at least double of whatever it costs when they swipe that card. So I just want to leave you a little bit of information. I'm really excited that all of you taking the time out of your day to join this session, and look forward to hearing from the next speakers. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much. And Monica, do you want to start with this slide presentation?
Absolutely, I'd love to. As I mentioned, I'm Monica. I am the campus supervisor of financial aid for Santander Community College. I will be sharing today some tips and tricks about applying for financial aid and why it's important. I'm going to start off with a presentation. I'm going to share that now. And we're going to go through and we're going to discover why it's so important to apply for financial aid. So first question I like to put out to that I always get when students come in is who should apply for financial aid? I always say everybody. Even if you think your parents make too much money, there's a good chance that you are going to be eligible for something. And so there's been so many families that have come in my office and like, oh, we're not going to qualify. You should definitely apply for financial aid still. And then they're surprised that they actually get help. A lot of people are surprised at how much they are able to get help with financial aid. So I tell all students that you should really just try to apply for financial aid. And it is important for you to do so because it opens up opportunities for more funding for your college. The topics I'm going to go over through this presentation are what is financial aid, what is cost of attendance, expected family contribution, financial need, different types of financial aid. I'm going to go over what the free application for federal student aid is, which is the FAFSA, which is probably something that you guys have heard of. And then I'll go over what special circumstances might be for financial aid. So the first thing I want to cover is what is financial aid, because you hear it, you want to know, we're telling you to apply for it, but what exactly is financial aid? Financial aid consists of funding provided to help students and families pay for post-secondary education costs. So financial aid is just basically giving is funds that will help you go to school. This is how you're going to pay for your education or whatever you decide to do after high school. This is how it's going to help you. Whether it's trade school, whether it's going to college, whether it's a 4-year, whether it's 2-year, this is how you're going to help get funding for it. Something I like to go over with cost of attendance. Cost of attendance is that total sum. How much is it going to cost you to go to college? How much it's going to cost you the tuition and fees you're going to have to pay if you live on campus. There's going to be room and board, there's books and supplies, there's transportation, and then of course you have those miscellaneous personal expenses that come up while you're going to college. The next thing I want to speak about is what's called an expected family contribution. Expected family contribution is something that we actually get from the federal government when we fill out the FAFSA form. I'm going to go into the FAFSA form a little bit more in the slides, but the expected family contribution is what the FAFSA does. So the FAFSA gives us what is the expected family contribution for your family. It takes in account of the student and the parent and how much they can put towards their education. So that's why we do the FAFSA is we need that number, that EFC to determine. And then what most colleges do when they're looking to award financial aid is that they take that cost of attendance, so how much it costs to go to school, then they subtract out what your EFC, expected family contribution is, and then you'll have what's called your financial need. And so that will determine, your financial need will determine how much financial aid you're eligible. So that is kind of how colleges overall look to see what they can offer. There are 2 categories of financial aid. There's need-based financial aid and then there's non-need-based. Need-based is based off of your income levels, and then non-need-based aid is your income doesn't really go into that. There are 4 types of financial aid that you can be eligible for. And there's 2 sections. So there's self-help aid, which is the type of financial aid where you have to do something in order to get it. Like loans, for example, are an example of self-help aid because you take out a loan, you borrow it, then you have to pay it back. Work study employment is you have to work to receive that type of aid. Scholarships and grants are considered gift aid. So this is free money you don't have to pay back. So when you're looking at financial aid awards, it's important to look for the scholarships and grants because those are the free money that you don't actually have to do anything for, except for usually apply for it via the FAFSA. There's sources of financial aid all around you. There's the federal government, states, colleges, universities, there's private sources, and then employers. They also offer assistance with financial aid. The federal government is our largest source of financial aid. It is provided on a need base, and you have to, in order to get any federal funding, you have to use the FAFSA. You have to apply with that free application for student aid every year. So it's not a one and done, it's something you'll have to do every year. And that is why it's so important to get the most access to financial aid. You have to do the FAFSA. And then there's certain eligibility requirements for the federal funding. Here's some examples of the type of funding that the federal government offers. The most popular one would be the federal Pell Grant. The most common one is the federal Pell Grant. That one it really helps a lot of students go to college. It really is one of the largest funding that I have on my campus and most campuses have. And then there's the federal supplemental grant, which goes along with Pell, and it helps with that cost of education. There's also federal student loans, which are better than a lot of some of the private loans that you might be eligible for. So that's something to keep in mind why it's important. So if you're planning on taking out a loan for college, these federal loans have really good repayment plans and repayment options. And then there's federal plus loans, which are available as well. There's also federal work study, which is basically you have a job working for the college or a community partner, and it's based off your financial need. There is the teach grant. So if you're looking into going into being a teacher, there's a lot of there's a teach grant. So it's something that you might want to look out for. And then there's the Iraq and Afghanistan grant, which is for students who have lost their parent to service in Iraq or Afghanistan. So in order to get any of these types of fundings, you have to complete the FAFSA form. States also have their own grant money. So most states have their own grant money. So most states also use the FAFSA, even though it's a federal form. Most states use the FAFSA to determine any sort of grant funding. So that's something that I like to keep students in mind. And then there's deadlines vary by state. So depending on what state you're going to school in, you want to take a look to see if there is a deadline for the FAFSA. And a lot of schools also have deadlines as well. So when you're looking to apply, you want to make sure that you look at what the financial aid deadlines are and to complete the FAFSA. This one, college and universities also have their own money. And so they also use the FAFSA to base this money off of. So that's another example of why it is so important to fill out the FAFSA application, because you have access to all of these grants that if you don't use the FAFSA, you're not going to have as much access to financial aid. And that helps in for education. Other private sources have options as well. There's a lot of churches, there's a lot of civic engagements, there's a lot of charitable organizations that have scholarships. But a lot of times scholarships also require you to fill out a FAFSA, and they need a copy of what's called a student aid report in order for them to determine whether or not to give you the scholarship. Employers also can help. So both students, if you have jobs, your employer might be able to help you, or if your parents might have opportunities to assist you as well. So now I'm going to get into the FAFSA a little bit more. The FAFSA is just going to, I break the FAFSA into 2 separate parts really. There's the demographic, and then there's the financial information. The information is used to calculate the EFC, as I mentioned earlier. Colleges use EFC to offer aid, and then the FAFSA is available in both English and in Spanish. It can be filled out anytime during the academic year. October 1st is when FAFSAs become available. So if you are graduating this year, the FAFSA is already available as of right now. And then I just want to mention again, a lot of colleges have priority deadlines. So I want you to make sure that you're aware of that. So you want to make sure you get your FAFSA in early. I always tell students to apply for financial aid, the earlier the better, because even at my institution, we have first come, first serve aid. So if you get your FAFSA in earlier, you might be you might have more aid available to you, just because there's sometimes a cap of how much we can offer in financial aid over the year. And so we give it to the people who get the FAFSAs in first. So a lot of times other schools do this similar process. The FAFSA is available. You can do it within 4 ways. The easiest and best way is doing the FAFSA on the web. There's paper FAFSAs. You can do it over the phone, or you can work with the financial aid office you're going to, and they can enter it for you. The best way to do it is doing it online. It's super simple. It's super easy. There's built-in edits to help costly errors. There's skip logic. There's something called the IRS data retrieval tool, which I'm going to get into in the next couple slides. And timely submission, it's available to check the status online, and it makes it a lot easier to apply. So if you're going to apply for the FAFSA, which I hope all of you do, is I want you to do it online. And it's the best way to do it. If you go to student aid, the website for it is studentaid.gov. And when you go in there, you'll create an account. It's called an FSA ID. I'm going to go into that a little bit more. When you click on the FAFSA form, you're just going to click parents or students can fill out the form. So if you're the student, you hit I am the student and want to access the form. And then if you're the parent, you click parent. Both parent and student will need to create what's called an FSA ID. This acts as electronic signature. And it also confirms your identity and things of that nature. It goes through Social Security and confirms all your information. So when you submit it, there might be less information being asked of you. And then only the owner should create the FSA ID. But this is something you're going to use throughout your whole entire career during college. So when you make the account, it's important to keep the username and password. Typically, the most common thing students come in my office for is I can't get into my FAFSA, so my staff has to help them reset their passwords and things like that. So when you're creating the account, I want you to make sure that you keep it in a safe spot. I tell them, my students, to put it in the notes in your phone, to take a picture of it, something that you can keep, so that way you have it, put it with your tax record. So you're going to use it every year to apply for financial aid, and then you'll use it even after if you end up taking out some loans and need to repay things. When filling out the FAFSA, I'm going to give you the tip to use the data retrieval tool. The data retrieval tool is basically, it's a connection with the IRS. So it will automatically import all of the tax information directly into the FAFSA. It makes the process so much easier. It will authenticate the taxpayer's identity. If the tax rate record is found, it transfers information to populate the FAFSA, and it reduces the amount of paperwork you'll probably have to submit to the actual financial aid offices. If we see that you, like in my office, if I see that you submitted, you transferred via the IRS, I will know that the information that you reported on your FAFSA is true. So sometimes it takes a lot longer if you manually enter in all the information, and it's not always as accurate. But when you link with IRS, it's going to be accurate, it's going to be quicker, and it saves so much time. When students come in my office and I help them with their FAFSA and I link with the IRS, they're like, "Oh my gosh, that was so easy." And I'm like, yeah, because we linked with the IRS and that automatically imported all of the tax information in it. There are some people that aren't eligible to use the data retrieval tool. These are the list of it. their taxes are funky sometimes, so it's not always an easy process to transmit it. Most students, these are very rare, most students are able to leave the IRS. When you first open the FAFSA, it's going to ask you for your social security number, it's going to ask for your citizenship status, it's going to ask for your marital status, and then it's going to ask for the highest education level completed by your parents. And then most students under the age of 24 need to provide parent information. Of course, there are some situations within the FAFSA where you would be considered an independent student, like if you're married or if you have a child, or if you're in the armed forces. Those are some of the examples where you have to provide parent information, but most students under the age of 24 need to provide parent information. And then once it gets to the dependency section, it'll go into information about parents. It'll ask about taxes, it'll ask you about income, other information, dislocated worker status. Then I'll ask if your family received any federal benefits for the last years. I'll ask about assets and income. The signatures are required. So as I mentioned, your FSAD can work as your electronic signature. You can do a signature page or you can do a paper FAFSA. Having the FSAD do your signature is way easier. The student needs to sign it and the parent, at least one parent needs to sign it. So here's some tips that I have for you about the FAFSA. These are frequent errors that I see all the time. So when you're going to fill out your FAFSA, I want you to just keep in mind that when you're filling it out, it's so important to put the correct information in there. So something that happens all the time is that students put the wrong social security number. When you put the wrong social security number, it creates a big headache because there's a lot of information that they need to correct, and it's going to take the process a lot longer. So make sure when you're filling it out, or if you're a parent filling it out, you use the right child's social security number, because I can't tell you how many times where parents use the wrong child's social security number when they're trying to create the FAFSA or trying to create the FSAID. Just make sure that you also list the parent information when it comes to their marital status correctly. And then we have to make sure that the income earned by the parent and step parent are both in there. So even though the step parent is not the biological parent, it is still required to have their information on there. A lot of people put untaxed income that they don't actually have. They just make sure when you're reading through the FAFSA that you answer the questions correctly. U.S. income taxes paid. I've had so many FAFSAs come through that they put that they made as much as they paid in taxes. So let's say you make $10,000, they say that they paid $10,000 in taxes. So it's very important that when you're going through, take your time to make sure you read the questions closely. Household size and members in college is something that we also see incorrectly a lot. It's the amount of people who you and your parents support currently. So that's really what, when it's asking about how many people live in your household, that's what the FAFSA is really looking for. And then a lot of people put wrong information about their assets and investments. So a lot of people include their retirement over homes and things like that. Those are things that we don't have to include on the FAFSA. So the house you live in, the car you drive, you don't have to include those as investments. You would only include homes if you had like a rental home or things like that. That would be investment, but you're actually, this is an example of who's included. I already went over that a little bit, so I'm going to skip past that. The federal government understands that the FAFSA might not show the accurate data that is affecting you right now. So right now for next year, you're going to have to use 2021 taxes. And with the 2021 taxes, that was 2 years ago. A lot can happen in 2 years, whether it's job loss, whether it is work cut back hours, something like that. We know things like that can happen. So if something happened in regards to an income change, you can get in touch with that financial aid office, and we're allowed to make changes according to what your situation is. Any decision that like the college makes is final, but it's important that if you do have income change, reach out so that they can make those adjustments. These are examples of what a special circumstance might be: unusual medical, dental expenses, extraordinary dependent care, secondary school tuition, divorce, loss of employment or income. There is a death of the spouse or parent. So I'm setting my source with some of these slides, some information on it, and receive National Association of Federal Student Aid Administrators. And here is my contact information. If you have any questions about the FAFSA or applying for financial aid, you can feel free to reach out to me, and me and my staff will be more than happy to assist you with any questions you might have.
Thank you very much. Janice?
Yes, sorry, I was muted. Monica, thank you so much. That was so much helpful information for students and parents. So just to do a little recap, if I'm a parent about to fill out the form online and you recommend online, what should I gather? What information should I gather ahead of time? So that way, when I sit down to fill out the FAFSA, I'm not starting and stopping. So just to kind of give a, I think you said everybody's social security numbers. I should gather my tax forms from 2021. Is that correct?
Yeah, so social security numbers, tax
Yep.
forms from 2021. I also, if you have investments, get those together, those numbers. And then I always tell students, know how much you have in your checking and savings accounts as well.
Okay, so any financial information and all of that, and current up-to-date amounts and everything and all of that. Okay, so no, that's really helpful because, you start doing something and then you're thinking, oh no, it's going to time me out. Now, is it, you're setting up an account where you have a password. Can you go back in, and if you, oh, wait a minute, I forgot about this, and I can go back in and everything.
Yeah, so it's either you can, if you start it and you're like, oh, I need more paperwork, you can always save it and go back to it.
Right.
Or if you submit it and you're like, oh, I made an error. Once it's processed, you can go back and make a correction to it.
Okay. Now, what if I'm a parent who has multiple children in college, which I have been that parent, and I no longer am anymore, thankfully. But how does that work? Do I fill out a different form for each child, or is it one per family?
So it's one per child. So every child that is in college will need to have their own FAFSA filled out. You would have your own ID, so that username and password that you can use on all the child's forms, but each one would need their own individual FAFSA filled out.
Okay, so making an account, then that it will pre-populate for my next child who goes to college. Is that what you're saying?
So making an account would make it easier in terms of you'll have access to the IRS, you'll be able to use it. It's only one account that you would.
Okay, sounds good.
Thank you very much. I had a question. What if the child is in foster care or emancipated? How do they go about doing that?
So if a child is in foster care, emancipated, those students would be considered independent students, where they don't actually need to provide parent information on the FAFSA. It's very limited on who is considered an independent student, but in those specific cases, they would be considered independent students and not need to provide parent information.
Thank you very much. Toby, do you have any parting words? No? Okay. Thank you, Janice. Do you have any other words you'd like, anything else, a hint on the college side as even a parent or your students?
What can we recap on the, is it studentaid.gov? Is it www.studentaid.gov? Is that where I find the online FAFSA form?
Yes, student aid.
If circumstances whatever the FAFSA gives you and the financial aid package comes in, what's the student's rights as far as accepting, or can they question them at all?
Absolutely. So if you ever have a question, I welcome my students if they have questions about the financial aid package to ask the financial aid office, because they're more than likely able to work with you, help you understand your financial aid award. And then if you talk to them and you have a circumstance where things change, you're like not understanding, you're like, I need more money, I can't afford this. A lot of times financial aid officers will be able to assist you and try to figure out something for you.
And I have one more. If you get outside scholarships, how does that affect your awards from a FAFSA?
So it can affect awards, but most of the time it's very limited. So that cost of attendance, which I talked about, we're only allowed to give aid up to that cost of attendance. So that is something that schools have to keep in mind, and that unmet need is another situation. We can only give aid up to the unmet need in most cases. So it can affect it, but for the most part, it is a good thing. I tell all my students to apply for outside scholarships. I tell all my students to, if you find one, apply for it. Because a lot of times scholarship programs will contact me and be like, hey, do you have any students that can apply for this? They're desperate for people just to apply for it because they're like, I have no one. Can you find at least one student to apply for it? There's a lot of scholarships that go unclaimed every year just because no one's applying for it. So I encourage all students to apply for scholarships.
Is there a general site or something that the students could look on for that?
Yeah, one of my go-to sites is called FAFSWebs, and they have a list of all of the different scholarships that are available. Scholarly is a really great other option. They have a list of scholarships as well. A lot of times, if you go to your guidance counselors, they have a list of what scholarships are available in your community. So that's usually where I tell students to start.
Well, thank you very much. Toby, do you have any parting words for us?
Yeah, apologies. I was wrangling one of the little ones over here for a moment. But no, I mean, I think you're really just great information. I would just say really pay close attention to when you get that FAFSA results back, right? What are grants? What are the loans? And really know that difference. A lot of times you're getting that funding that can be used for books, for room and board that people don't realize. And I've even seen situations where then all of a sudden you switch what your housing situation is going to be, or you find some of these websites to get your books at a cheaper price than you would have if you went to the school bookstore, where they've actually even had some surplus money left over. And what's really important to recognize is if that's borrowed money that you're going to have to pay back over interest, to really do something very smart with those dollars, whether it's putting it back to loan, putting it for savings, but just recognize, particularly if it's a loan, it is not sort of free money. At the end of the day, you would have to pay it back, and just making sure that you're really recognizing that difference on your FAFSA award would be my parting word. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Janice. Thank you, Monica. Thank you, Toby. And we look forward to learning more about this again tonight. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.